Hey there, folks. Wrel here. Today, we're here to run you through the character creation process of Distal, a high fantasy, class-heavy, D20 based tabletop role-playing system currently in alpha development. If you want to hang out, make characters, possibly even play the game, you can feel free to do that on playthisrpg.com. So today, I have with me a few guests who will be creating characters, and then we're going to be running through a 3-episode mini campaign, not quite one shot after that. And depending on the types of characters that they create, the type of organization that they build, that'll determine what we end up doing for the campaign itself. So I have with me John from Dragonmind. I have Stephanie Roy and Stephanie and Roy. You want to chime in? Okay, cool. From the Stephanie Ann podcast. And I have Kitty, who is just an excellent person. You can all feel free to chime in and say hello. It's all good.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Just a cacophony of noises. Okay, so we are going to kind of step through the process, and then I'll be taking small breaks to speak on the different aspects of character creation in Distal. And I'll be jumping back and forth between the packet. All the folks that you see on screen are either doing this in pen and paper. Yeah. Okay. And awesome. And they have the document in front of them as well. But we're going to go step by step. So as you can see, look at Distal. I'm going to start right at the top, and then we're going to kind of step through the process, talk through the process as well. So all of you are now free to choose a lineage. There's Atlian, Dwarf, Elf, Kinsguard, Tanglefolk, and a few others as well. And if you are interested in how they all work out, we'll see what they choose.
Should we say what lineage we're selecting?
Yeah. No, if you have ideas for what you want to play or want to talk about it, yeah, let's just treat it like a character creation session. So on the character sheet, we're going to start up here. Probably not with a name. You can figure that out on your own time. But the lineage is one of the first things that we choose. And there's a fillable PDF available for download from the Discord or the website. And you could always print it out and then fill it in old school. So if we look at, for example, in Atlian, they're going to have 30 feet of movement, 1d8 to their health die, and then a +1 to wisdom. So it might look something like this. So the health die will do 1d8, and then a wisdom would be like a +1. I'll just fill it in as we go. Why not? All this sort of this stuff will change. I'm not going to hammer on it too much, but as questions arise through this process, we'll answer them.
So speaking of questions, I'm selecting Elf. And part of my combat proficiencies is in Elven weapons. And it says it provides proficiency in Great Bow and Blade Staff. So 5th edition has like a universal proficiency bonus. Distal doesn't. So would that just be like one rank in each of those?
Right. So in Distal, we actually have weapon groups. I think it'd be similar to Pathfinder that way. But Elven weapons is your proficiency. And when we go down to the weapons section, you'll see the Great Bow and the Blade Staff will both have, they'll say Elven underneath them, so that you know that they're associated with that proficiency. But the Great Bow will also say bow. The Blade Staff will also say spear. All right, so did we settle on lineage for everybody? John is sticking with Elf. Steph. Yvain.
Yeah, Plane of Storms.
Sweet.
Ulstad.
Cool. And Ulstadr are, I guess they would be mostly, I think they'd be kind of sort of equivalent to Goliath. Is that what they're called in Dungeons and Dragons? Okay. Yeah, something like that, except they're more giant-like, a little bit more lanky. That's how I envision them, at least. We'll need to get some art at some point.
So before we move on, I had a question about the nimble movement from the elf lineage.
Hmm.
It says that climbing costs only 5 feet of additional movement. So usually in fifth edition, if you don't have a climb speed, it's kind of like double movement. It just costs an extra. So what's your intended calculation for this?
The cost of climbing 5 feet is 15 feet. If we were to go to the elven lineage, their benefit is that their climbing costs only 5 feet of additional movement. So there would be 10 per 5 feet of movement instead of 15 per 5 feet of movement. All right, so now please feel free to move down to your class selection. So classes they're probably one of the most standout parts of your builds in Distal. This is a very class heavy game, and all the classes are meant to be fairly, I would say, more specific than you'd find in Dungeons and Dragons, less templatized. You can there's still plenty of room, hopefully, to kind of shift them toward the purpose and kind of the character concept that you come up with. But for our game, we wanted to create a singular setting and a world for everything to be grounded in. So every class here kind of has a part to play in this game.
I'm going to go with Elementalist.
Cool.
I love Ferryman, so I'm going to build that one for this little campaign.
Cool. And that was your first character too.
Yes. Yeah, I like the interaction with the death mechanics, which is something that I have found to be unique in Distal, at least in my experience with TTRPGs. So it's fun. It creates fun mechanical interaction.
All right. The class that Steph is talking about, the ferryman, is, if you imagine from Greek mythology, Charon. But in this game, the reason that ferrymen exist at all is because, so I guess a ferryman is somebody who has seen death and come back from it. So everybody in the distal plane is meant to, or it's said to, that they travel across the Ebon Deep, which is a totally separate plane, but it's like kind of an infinite sea. You hope that they reach the other side, and then on to whatever afterlife there happens to be. The ferrymen have been to the Ebon Deep and then back, so they're scarred by death in some manner, and mechanically, they are a spellcaster, but they gain spell juice back when spell slots, energy, whatever, when something nearby dies. So you have this interesting feeling of just knowing when something kind of shuffles off its mortal coil, and then you feeling energized when that happens, which can create some interesting roleplay mechanics. Right, I neglected to mention, we're going to bring your characters all the way up to 3. So just choose your class, and you can fill in the willpower die, and you can fill in the health bonus, and then outside of that, it's basically all you need. It's worth having an understanding of what attributes you're going to want to pick based on the class that you choose. But really, I'm going to switch over to the document here. If you look at, so for example, if we wanted to be a berserker, if I roll down to the berserker page, knowing what the health bonus is matters, knowing what the willpower die is matters, knowing what the suggested attributes are matters, because our next step is going to be choosing attributes for our character, or rather assigning them. All right, so in Distal, we have primary attributes and secondary attributes. We are going to have the players choose 2 attributes to become their primary attributes, and then all the rest of the attributes are secondary. And the reason that this matters is that when you level, certain levels give you a primary attribute bump and a secondary attribute bump, and then less often you'll receive a secondary attribute bump. So you got choose 2 primary attributes, and then you can, on the sheet, click the little star thing. There's like a little diamond right beneath. Okay, and then the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to increase our primary attributes by 1 and our secondary or 1 secondary attribute by 1 as well.
Do any of these lineage options have a penalty?
Yeah. Ulstauder does. The penalties tend to scale with how good their starting traits are and how high their health die is. So an Ulstauder has a D12 for a health die, which is that's a lot of health. Really, really strong. But they have a -1 to dexterity and a +1 to strength. So certain classes or certain lineages will kind of balance out that way. We can figure out through playtesting whether or not this continues to make sense, or if everybody should get some sort of downside, or maybe be able to assign a downside. But currently, this is kind of where it lands. So right after attributes, you start making hard decisions about stuff that you probably don't understand if you're like new to the game. But go down and choose a bloodline ability. So the elf, just as an example, they have unnaturally quiet, so they can do some stealthy stuff. They can kind of like circumvent some of the detriments that heavier armor can provide, or they have bow runner, which makes it so you can disengage more easily. What have you all picked for your bloodline abilities?
I went with unnaturally quiet. I don't know if I mentioned I'm taking Cut Purse as my class.
Okay.
So I figured, adding stealth to advantage probably would not be a bad idea.
I took Weeping Steel so that if I roll less than an average on a buffer, the durability is refunded.
What did the ferryman choose for their trait? Bloodline.
I picked Melding Blood. So your natural elemental damage buffer increases to a d6, and it can buffer a second elemental damage type.
Word. So this part I'm going to leave in. We just had a whole conversation talking about how these two need to be, well, how this one probably wouldn't work for her character and how this one needs to be reworked. So there's that. Sweet. Now, ready to move on? Cool. So in Distal, when we have you write a background, it is a series of events that kind of catch you up to the point where you become an adventurer, or whatever you've become now that you're like setting out in the world and probably causing all sorts of problems. We do so via prompts, and then these prompts are meant to be specific enough to spark ideas, but not so specific that they kind of lock you in place and make it feel like you're being forced to play a specific type of character. We do suggest that you, when you're rolling up prompts, run through it and roll the actual dice, see what you come up with. These are going to give you benefits to your knowledge and your skills or items.
We've been helping you playtest for a while, so I've done this several times at this point, and there have been times that as I went through the character creation process, I had no idea what the character was going to be, and I was just sort of picking stuff as I went. And then when I got to the background part, doing the rolling, it just came up with a cool story that I wasn't expecting, and then instantly got me into a place of starting to flesh it out in my head, where that character came from and what the full story is, because this doesn't tell you everything. It doesn't box you in. It just gives you just enough to kind of get that spark of inspiration going. I have also gone through this process where I kind of had an idea in my head of what I wanted it to be. And for the most part, rolling the background made it more interesting. It took the germ of a story I had in my head and fleshed it out a little bit, maybe tweaked it slightly, but in a way that was really fun. There's been once or twice that I've wanted to change because it really didn't match my vision. But for the most part, actually, I think I've changed it more because just by rolling, I ended up like no equipment or something like that, which can happen. So that is one thing to pay attention to as you're rolling through it. But in general, I have found this to be inspiring rather than constricting, because I know that that's one thing that can come up with a prescribed background, is not feeling like you really have control of your character's story. But I feel, if anything, this unlocks a different level of creativity, at least for me.
Yeah, definitely super excited to run through this and kind of listen to what you all are ending up rolling, because it'll be easier to talk about it once we get to it. So in the first prompt, I grew up. What did you all roll?
I rolled a 4 in the wilds.
Okay, so you grew up in the wilds, which means you get a +1 to beasts, +1 to medicine, and then a creature contact. Which, full disclosure, we're running a 3-session story arc, so the contacts may not come into play. So just for you all here, I'm still gonna try to see what we can do, but I don't want to force it either. So there are optional rules at the end to where you can trade out a contact for just like 15 gold or whatever, if you are running a short form type of adventure. So we'll just keep that in mind as we move through.
So
John.
I grew up abused by my owners,
Always a good one.
which that suggests certain things about the world.
Yeah, there's actually you'll find a lot that give you opportunities to be kind of morally gray, or maybe even borderline villainous. Like there's an option that talks about you being exposed as a charlatan, and kind of run out of your village and that sort of thing. And the goal is to have a world where everything is not sunshine and rainbows. You're not even a hero. The goal is to create a system that is grounded but not gritty. If you look at, just for comparison, or if you played the game The Witcher, very, very, very gritty, where people are doing a lot of scummy things, and life is not, your tomorrow is not assured. This is not that far in that direction, but we do try to give you more options than you'd find in a heroic fantasy.
I rolled that I grew up without early memories. So my question is, I get 1 ingenuity for my class, but this one also gives me 1 ingenuity. Am I adding it to that, or does something else?
All right, so actually that exposes why you want to do the class stuff last. So in the class, once you hit level 1, it's going to give you 2 knowledge proficiencies, but it also says if you've already gotten those from your background, then choose untrained ones. So for the time being, let's just sit on the 1 ingenuity from your background, and then we'll hit the class stuff toward the end.
Is there a reason why you can't do it the other way around, and just in the background say if you already have that skill, just pick something else so that you could keep it in sequence?
Yeah, I mean that's an option. I definitely was having a hard time explaining all of this as you move through the packet, because they don't even necessarily know what a background is going to be, and there's just like a lot of words on screen anyway. So I thought that the singular line of don't like we're going to get to your class stuff later, so just write down these few things would have gotten there. But I think based on experience, especially if you've played a TTRPG, you just want to fill in all the things. And I think we're going to run into that problem. So there's definitely room for improvement here.
Yeah, because I think it's the same end result. It's just if the box is filled, fill a different box. So if you do it so instead of saying in the class, if your background gave it to you, pick something else. Just say in the backgrounds, if your class gave it to you, pick something else.
Word.
All right, I was gonna ask you about this later, but now seems like a good time. Would it make sense to just switch the background and class sections so that as you're linearly going through, like as I fill out the background, sometimes that inspires me for what I'm going to want my class selection to be. So if I grew up as a villain, like maybe cut purse would make more sense, but if I'm like a hero or something, like based on after I roll my background, sometimes I kind of discover what class I want after.
So I totally agree. And it's something that I've been really struggling with because if you look at Dungeons and Dragons, it's race, class, all the other nonsense. However, in Dungeons and Dragons, your background, which is toward the end of the process, it's just like, yeah, we're just going to throw some stuff at you and, whatever. It's not as ingrained in the system as this is. So I've been wanting to change it, but I would really like feedback on it too, because people are so used to that particular process. And when the game was, I think this comes back to this game still trying to find its voice. But I think by moving the background to some of the beginning stages, it will make more sense overall and kind of prep you with, or like give you that pre-frame of how the rest of the game is supposed to work. So I agree. That's
Yeah, and I think we've been talking about, what's the USP of the game, the unique selling point. And I think the story creation pieces are a unique selling point. So if you come out hot with that, number one, if they've never done it before, they don't know any different if they've never played a TTRPG. So you're actually getting them into something that like they can understand story creation. Everyone knows how to make a story. You've done some point in something. So if you get them building a story first, now they can see how these lineages and classes, words they don't know, start to connect to it. And now if they've played a TTRPG before, you're shaking them out of the paradigm they think they know, and you're getting them doing something different. And you can call it out and say, this is going to be a different order because this game puts story first, or however you want to say it. So I think that would make it different and unique to prioritize story over mechanics.
I'm going to layer on just compliments about the background system in this game. So in D&D, it's actually not supposed to work the way everybody does it. So what everybody does usually is they look at the different backgrounds like urchin or soldier and they pick one, and you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to create your own background, and those are just suggestions. But the way that the book is formatted, it implies that those are what your options are. So I have a player that's been playing with me for 7 years, and I still had to remind them that no, you're not supposed to be just picking one of those. You're supposed to be creating your own background using the rules at the beginning of the section. So formatting wise and just how integral it is to the system, this is much, much better done.
So I think that some of the, like, not being able to shake out of the stuff that's listed in D&D Beyond is probably a problem too. Because if you look at like Sly Flourish did he did a poll of his viewership, just how many of them actually use D&D Beyond, and I think it was like 50%, which is very significant, and it's only going to keep moving that direction. We're not going to, paper's not becoming more popular. And when you see those options, even if it has a caveat that says, hey, these are just suggestions, they won't be. You're still going to be pulling spells out of Strixhaven that you shouldn't be pulling when your GM doesn't want you to. Maybe that's a different problem, but okay. So this was originally going to be us rolling up characters for a campaign, but now it's also talking a lot about alpha development, because this is how that works. You talk to people, you get feedback, and ideally you incorporate the bits that make sense and help strengthen the product as it moves toward a goal. And with Distal in particular, one of the things that it continues to try to do is find its voice. So all these little bits that you're hearing about from the panel here is this is how the sausage is made. All right, so if we move down to the second part of the backgrounds, I grew up prompt, and my days were spent. What did you roll?
My days were spent out to sea.
Out to sea. Let's see. Just to show on the table here. You roll, so there's a bunch of options, 30 in total. So you roll a 1d6 first to see what bucket you get thrown into, and then roll a 1d10.
So just to remind, I grew up being abused by my owners and spent my days practicing magic, which is extra funny because I'm playing a non-magic class. So this is this is gonna be intricate. I'm just bad at it, so I want to stab people.
Yeah, see,
So
this is why I love this, because it inspires just like these little twists on whatever you had. And you can, yes, he could have re-rolled, or he could have just gone down the list and picked something more appropriate, but it brings in this like fun element that doesn't mess up your character idea. It just adds this little bit of like spice to it.
So, 2 notes on that. First off, this is the sort of thing that it makes more sense for you to go back and put the backgrounds first before the classes. Secondly, what you're getting from this is like knowledge and skills. So we have a skill called Mage Work in the game, and what it is the you're trying to manipulate magic. So even if you were, for example, not a magic user, you could still be using Mage Work from an understanding of magic, and even be able to diffuse magical traps, just as an example. Like if you were a mage hunter, that is something that can very strongly make sense for this particular character. But you do need to work at it in order for it to make sense. So, yeah. Steph, where'd you end up?
I spent my days pursuing fame.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the I became.
What is a sellsword?
It's a mercenary.
Is that like, all right. So it's like a sword for hire?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I could kind of figure it out for the context clues, but I've never heard that word before.
Yeah. So this particular box, just for awareness, there's a dev note right underneath it. It says, hey, if you need certain items for your class, because we've gone through this multiple times, and this was like a constant sticking point where you won't quite end up with what you want as far as loadout is concerned. So it says, pick your loadout, essentially, and then you can keep the prompt, or the other way around. These are all suggestions more than anything else, but it also is meant to be systemized so that you can just play the game the way that it is intended. So we deliberately bake in little caveats here to give you permission to make the game work for you, instead of you having to redefine the bounds of the game. All right, so what do we end up as? Steph?
All right, so I almost always shift this one. Now that's not a bad thing, because the whole point of this is like roll and see what you get, and then if you don't like it, you can pick something that fits something different. Now also I have an idea in my head for this character, so that's affecting it as well.
What is your idea for this particular character? Like, where did you land there?
So I'm building the same character I played at first. Like,
Okay.
I enjoyed that character. And that was before you had developed this background thing. So far, the first two have had like that little, they either fit or they add this little bit of spice that it's like, okay, I could see how that little twist could make the story more interesting. And this one, like a soldier, just doesn't fit it, but maybe I'm going to be open. I want to see what happens with the next one, the last piece of it, before I make a decision as to whether or not, because see, again, at first I was like, no, that doesn't fit her story. But as I'm kind of thinking through the backstory that I had created, it's like, okay, I could see how that element could come into it and which direction it could go. And also where it took her, like in what we already kind of played with her. Not that that's going to be relevant to, like, we're not keeping that continuity of story. It's not canon to what we're about to do, but it's still in my head of this idea that I had come up with. And as I talk it out, it's starting to come together of like, I can see how this would fit into her story. And again, it makes it this really fun puzzle of how does this creatively fit into what I already had? How does it add to what I already had rather than making me change something? So that's why I can't say enough about how fun this background thing is, because what it does to the storytelling has been really, really interesting.
Were you a soldier? Because I'm also a soldier.
Yeah, that's what I rolled, and that was the thing that I was debating as to whether or not. But I can, after we get all the way through, I can share what like my idea for her story was, and then how I'm incorporating the background stuff. But I'll just go all the way through it first, because it's probably like not even like it may not even be on the same type of soldier type thing.
Kitty, where'd you end up?
I rolled that I became a nomad, so I get 4 low-priced items and 1 weapon for proficiency. And my question is, at later levels, do you have the opportunity to gain more weapon proficiencies? I can't remember.
Yes, yeah. So you're very quickly going to either be able to become more proficient in a weapon or be more diverse with what weapons you gain access to. So these starting points, I would say they don't even define your character. You can change it fairly readily, and you also cap out pretty quick too. So the progression is, I would definitely say that there's more breadth when it comes to the knowledge and skills and proficiencies than there is depth. But there's more depth when it comes to the actual development of your class and kind of the specialties that you're reaching into. So if we go down to your backgrounds, we're going to say you became a blank the day.
The day I betrayed my best friend.
Okay.
Aw.
So I rolled the day they ran me out of town.
So I ended up with when someone framed me, or the day someone framed me for a crime.
Okay. Does everyone have a contact at this point? You have 2. Okay.
I do not.
Oh, you don't? Okay. You have 3.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have 0 contacts.
Okay. Well, John and Steph have enough contacts for everybody.
Yeah, I've got a mentor and 2 nemesis.
Cool.
Real quick. So my original backstory for this character before the background piece like came into it was, so she's Yvain, which means she comes from another plane, and she's a ferryman, which means she's died before somehow. So I had her as like an apprentice healer and herbalist in a small quiet village. So the first part of my background that I rolled was I grew up in the wilds. So that works. Like she grew up in the wilds of the Plain of Storms. And then I had like a plague come through and devastate her village. Oh, the other piece of that, so grew up in the wilds and days were spent pursuing fame. Now, I originally had her being kind of known for her knowledge and compassion. That doesn't mean that there can't be like an ego element that was played into that, where she was known for it, but at the same time there was this craving for attention that was happening in the background at the same time. And then a plague devastated her village, and she tried to save as many people as possible, but they kept dying. And then people abandoned the village, and she stayed there until the last person died, and then she got sick and drifted off into death. And then she woke up on the new plane, kind of changed, where she was sort of like, the ferryman stuff. She's just sort of cold and now has this connection to death. So I can see where I could weave in a soldier piece where the plague comes through and it creates that adds a layer to the story that I hadn't thought about, of like maybe this plague comes through the area and it sets off political stuff between tribes. So now there's fighting that happens. So now instead of being able to focus on being a healer, she's also a soldier, but you can be a soldier and a medic at the same time. So she could still be doing that piece of things. And then being framed for a crime is an interesting twist on, here she was trying to be someone that was known for being compassionate and knowledgeable about healing, and now someone does something in the midst of that war or just devastation that was happening that makes her look like someone she's not, and then she dies with that weight. And now that kind of adds to, when she comes back, she's a little bit hopeless about this life, and and focused more on what comes next because of the, so it's just interesting. I could take what the rolling gave me and add to the story. It doesn't take away any of my creativity. It allows me to bring in another layer of complexity. And I can see where not everyone would want a hand manipulating their creative story, but if you're open to it, it's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty fun.
Oh, I was just saying it's a framing thing. Yeah, because in D&D, one of its features is also perceived by a lot of people as a bug, which is it's kind of a kitchen sink system. So it's trying to be a lot of different things. And so because of that, you usually go into it that the game master has to be responsible for setting the tone and what specific world they're going to play in. Whereas the beauty of a specific system like this is that you kind of have to know that you're not playing your own thing going in, that there's like an established world with established classes that interact specifically with that world. So for me, as someone who's played a lot of D&D, it's a lot easier to come into this a little bit more open because the expectations are kind of set.
Yeah, and I like the example that you gave at the bottom of the background things where, you sort of have a character growing up at a traveling circus and spending their days pit fighting. Is that because they were pit fighting in the circus and it was some sort of gladiator scenario? Or is it that that's what they were doing for fun? Or is it that's what they were doing to pay the bills because their family was struggling? So they had this supplemental thing that they were kind of like almost felt forced into, to make ends meet, to send money back to their family because there's someone sick at home. I don't know. Or their village needs help. I don't know. Like it can unlock, sometimes banks to the river can actually unlock more creativity than you would have had if you just had a blank slate, because now you're just kind of, it's hard not to think tropey and come up with all the cliches. So this gets your head going in a different direction and gives you just enough so that you can come up with something different and unique.
Sometimes we're limited by the bounds of our own imagination, so we need something to kind of be the key. Let's see, Kitty, did you already? Oh, yeah, we're all good. We're done, right? Moving on to the tally knowledge.
I would be interested to hear everyone's backstory sentences in full, because like I heard the pieces, but having it feel fleshed out in one whole sentence and kind of what we pulled, like obviously we got stuff already, but what we pulled from the sentence that was built, because I heard their pieces, but I honestly by now can't remember what
What was yours?
Well, mine was, I grew up without early memories and my days were spent out at sea. I became a nomad the day that they ran me out of town. So I'm wondering if I lost my memory or if it was, something traumatic happened and my brain told me, no, you don't need to remember that. So I'm almost wondering if it's going to be a quest for identity or something else that, we'll figure out.
Yeah, or if they were taken from you by like a spell or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, and see, this is like the backgrounds give you the questions to start asking, because now you're asking why about a specific thing rather than just what, trying to piece together a bunch of facts to make a story. You're asking why this story happened. And like my thing doesn't sound anything like the backstory that I have created, but it fits into it. Like you wouldn't get the backstory that I created from the 2 sentences that were rolled, but it's still there. John, what'd you get?
So I grew up abused by my owners and spent my days practicing magic. I became a soldier the day I betrayed my best friend. So I see this as kind of like there is a desperate situation that this character was able to escape from, and they had to leave the best friend that was also owned by whoever back. And they came across someone who was willing to help, that tried to impart some kind of magical whatever education upon them, but they for whatever reason they weren't able to attune for it. But that also made them very knowledgeable in fighting people who would abuse magic. So I see this as kind of like a redemption story, very Han Solo like, where there was probably a really bad backstory, but that doesn't make them a bad person.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. So we're going to jump down real quick to tally your skills and knowledge. So skills are things you do. Knowledge is like topical, just all the things that you know or you think you know. And the orange there at the bottom says for each point of intelligence that you have, add 1 skill or 1 point to a skill that has 0 points. And then for each point of wisdom that you have, add 1 point to a knowledge that has 1 or 0 points. And this is just, if you don't have intelligence or wisdom, you don't have to do anything. It's all good. It's kind of a bonus for using one of those softer stats. All right, so now we're going to roll into the develop contacts section, which is if you've received a contact of some description from your background. For example, in this prompt here, it says, I foiled an assassination attempt, which will give you an aristocratic contact. So if we go into contacts, you would be rolling once on each column here for some of the little quirks that tell you a little bit about what that contact is, what they, how people perceive them maybe, or what they can potentially do for you. So every contact has 3 main requirements that can help propel your character's story forward. The contact can provide something of value to your character, and your character can reliably pursue interactions with them, meaning that you will want to develop a contact first on your own, and then come up with like an image of who they could be as it relates to your background, because they've had some sort of impact on your life. And then you talk to the GM and figure out how it works into the campaign. Because you don't want to end up in a situation where you have a contact, it's a super important character to your backstory, and then you never meet them. And specifically, we frame contacts in such a way that you can pursue interactions with them. They may not always like be there, or you may have some sort of requirement. For example, if you have a nemesis, that nemesis might be somebody that you need to kill, or somebody that you want to get revenge on. That doesn't mean that they're just like lying around. So the other big note is that in a short form campaign, or like the 3-episode thing that we're going to be doing after character creation, you can opt out of contacts and just pull in 15 gold per contact for your character sheet. Or if it's just like you've gotten a contact but you don't really want to deal with it, or if it's just like too much and you're having a hard time coming up with reasons why you should care, then feel free to kind of offload those into just a kind of a monetary benefit, and it should balance out fine.
Are contacts the type of thing that you can have a conversation with your GM about in terms of how, like, who has creative control and how much creative control? I mean, I've been in situations with GMs where they did stuff with my backstory and I didn't like that they did it without my permission, essentially, or brought them in when I wasn't like in a place that I was like connected to my character enough or whatever, that, you know, like it my contacts got forced on me essentially, as opposed to, like, John does a really great job when we're playing our D&D games of being very responsive to what each of us want with our backstories, and he brings them in to the degree that we ask for it. So I don't know. That's just more. I think it's just like a trigger point, like a wound that I have from playing games in the past. Like I hate it when you have this contact and it becomes, or a patron or whatever, and then it becomes a point of manipulation, where the GM can start to mess with your character and its story without your express permission.
Yeah, that is one of like the memes, which is like, oh, introduces family. Oh, they're about to get kidnapped. Like, it's so tempting for a GM that isn't confident enough to make the game interesting on their own to artificially create conflict by trying to take the thing that you care about most right away?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tricky just because it's there's so much that's left up to your GM to kind of figure out. The way that we try to frame it here, it's systemized so that you know that there's some sort of interaction that is meant to take place. But it does try to offer that your character is going to be the one to kind of be in charge of that.
Yeah, and I'm mostly just using this as an opportunity to advocate for communication at the table on both sides.
Right.
So you need to speak up about what you want and don't want with your character and their backstory, and then the GM should also check in at regular times and maybe even ask the question like, hey, and you can, if you don't want to give anything away, you can ask the whole table. Say, I'm thinking about bringing in a contact or two. Where is everybody at with their contacts? Like, send me a private message if you don't want to say it out loud, but let me know if there's something you don't want happening so that I can bring in the right elements. So it's just, if there's an opportunity to advocate for communication, I'm going to take it. So that's all this is.
Hey, we have the same pencil.
I knew that was coming.
And also, again, I think this comes back to what we were saying about the background tables to begin with. It comes down to expectations. So just from a structural standpoint, personally, when I see that my contacts are going to be randomly generated by a tool, I'm going to be more okay with my GM utilizing them and having more creative control than, again, a game like D&D, which, because it's trying to do so many things, and it's a little, I don't know, it's a little more nebulous. Like, you need more communication. So absolutely, I agree that communication is something that needs to happen between a game master and their table. And because there's banks to the river, because there's a tool, I think it would make it easier for me to relinquish a little more control over the contacts that get generated.
Ideally, these contacts also give you a little bit of information on how they should be used, because it's, yeah, like if you give too much information to your GM, bad things can happen. But if it has a caveat, so I'm looking at a particular, so I'm trying to find it. There's one that says, okay, so in the familial contact, they are whatever that is, whatever, and can appear at the best/worst times. That is a line. So as a GM, you kind of have some context for like, oh, okay. Well, wouldn't it just be like perfect if this contact showed up here and now, in the midst of everything else? So providing a little bit more information, I think will help smooth this over. That being said, let's walk through one of the contacts.
All right, I'm going to actually go with my mentor, even though I have two nemesi. So my mentor, who I'm guessing also is trying to teach me magic, is a respected doctor that is infinitely patient and can soothe those around them. Randomly generated.
Metatherapist. Who's trying to solve your crippling issues regarding abuse. Okay, cool. I dig it. What was one of your nemesis ones?
So one of the nemesi is a war hero that's employed by a monarch and has a legendary weapon.
Oh, okay.
I'm wondering if that was my best friend I betrayed.
Oh, interesting.
I smell an epic battle.
Exactly. You can. Some of these can totally be like, yeah, no, it's going to be the big bad for the campaign, and it will be grounded in your story. So you won't have to try too hard as a GM.
Okay, so I had two. I have a creature and a nemesis. And I kind of already shared a little bit of the backstory. And again, it's interesting how you can fit them in. So my creature contact is a baby worm that is the master of its domain and can recover forgotten trinkets. So I'm wondering if its domain is somehow connected to the plane of storms, which I have, like I have this character set up to not have a lot of memory of that. So there's like an interesting dynamic there. And then the nemesis I manipulated because I rolled that they were a guild member, which is not nearly as fun as making them a war hero based on like the backstory that I have of, someone framed me for a crime. So if I make my nemesis a war hero, and then the rest of it I did roll, that is a little douchebag and and has magical protections, like that's interesting, So like the guild member part like didn't feel right, but changing it to war hero is like I could totally see how that fits into everything. So again, it added layers, and I think instead of like originally I had the kind of the catalyst, the crucible be a plague, I think it's probably makes more sense that there was some sort of war on the storm or the plane of storms that created all of this. But other than that, it's making the story something. Like I'm excited to play this because it's a compelling backstory.
Worm with a Y or worm with an O?
With a Y.
I'm very pleased with myself just for putting a little douchebag as as an option for a nemesis. Gets me every time. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next section. This is going to get a little bit crunchy is not the right word, but it's definitely more specific when we're picking your gear. So go down to the prepare for combat section. We are going to, there's a lot of text up on screen right now, but I'll tell you the gist of it. Through your background, you've gotten a number of weapon proficiencies. We're going to trade those in for or weapon groups that you would like to use. You become proficient in. If you want to become proficient in axes, you could pick axes. If you want to become proficient in pole arms, you can become proficient in pole arms. And then on top of that, we're going to use your low-priced items or medium-priced items or gold, if you have them, and then actually purchase gear that your character will be wearing at the start of their journey. So I'm just going to run through some of how weapons work in Distal. So if our character became proficient in axes, I would be able to use a hatchet. I would also be able to use a battle axe. I would also be able to use a halberd, which is both a polearm and axes as far as proficiencies are concerned. A war pick, which is clubs and axes. So there's groups, and you only need to have one proficiency. You don't need them both. You don't need all of them. Just one, and that allows you to use that type of weapon. What this is meant to indicate is like, hey, if you could use a sword or like a long sword, you could probably use a short sword. So they actually, okay, that's an awful example. I actually have short blades and long blades is two different options. But I think short sword. All right, now I have to fix this for myself. A short sword is both a short blade and a long blade, just as an example. And then we, on the right-hand side, you have a price, which is a literal gold amount, and then also just low or medium or high. So if you got low price item from your character background, you can trade that in for a low price item that's on the table. When it comes to actually equipping an item, you need to have the prerequisite attributes. So if you are a character with 1 strength, you can use anything that has 1 strength. Things get a little bit more complicated, I guess, maybe, when you go down to hybrid weapons. So if we were to scroll down further, you get like a boomerang requires you to have 2 strength slash dex. What that means is that you need at least 1 point in either stat, and then they at least need to add up to 2. Doesn't matter what combination that they add up in. For example, if I am trying to learn how to use a reverse blade, in order to wield one, I would need at least 1 dex and then 3 strength, or at least 1 strength and 3 dex, or 2 strength and 2 dex, because it just needs to equal 4 or higher. If you do not pass these requirements, then you are considered untrained. And if you do not have a proficiency, so for example, if I didn't have, in terms of the reverse blade, a long blade or a great weapon proficiency, then I would be using that weapon untrained, which comes with its own penalties. So that was a lot. John, what you got?
So just to clarify, we only need proficiency in either of them to be able to use it, right?
That's right.
And for low-priced items, so I have 3 low-priced items. Should I feel free to use all 3 on weapons, or should I save one for armor or other utility things like food?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's go with So use one on armor for sure. Use one on a weapon for sure. Probably two on weapons at that point if you're looking to dual wield. But if you scroll down to adventuring equipment services, the stuff that's relevant there would be like a medicine kit might be relevant for this particular adventure if somebody goes down and doesn't have any healing. A potion of regeneration might be fine. I'll say let's not worry about supply packs and food though for this particular adventure, because we probably won't be doing a lot of overland travel. And if we do, I'll make sure that your characters get a limited amount as they gear up for their adventure.
I got a total of 5 low-priced items. Am I able to combine any of them to be a medium price?
Yeah, so you can take your 3 low price items and then turn them into a medium. There isn't specific rules for this in the document currently, but that's how it's balanced.
Is there a place where I'm supposed to figure out like armor proficiencies? Like if I'm using light versus heavy?
So there's no armor proficiencies in the game. So as long as you have the prerequisite attributes, you're all good.
What's the benefit of something being a spell focus?
You can use your weapon proficiency as your casting proficiency, which spellcasting proficiency tends to rank up less quickly than a martial proficiency.
Okay, that's helpful.
Ferryman is like kind of it's like a hybrid spellcaster, right? As opposed to like a true spellcaster.
Yeah, the distinction isn't as clear as it would be in like Dungeons and Dragons, but due to the unreliability of how their spells or their spell juice comes in, they need to be very martial. So just to speak on this real quick, one of the major ways that we differentiate equipment in Distal is through properties. This is very similar to, I think Pathfinder does this a lot as well. But the weapon arsenal is very specific in that it is meant to have a particular type of gameplay associated with it. So when you're going into creating a character, you think about what sorts of things you want to be good at and where you feel like you'll fall when it comes to combat, just like the ranges that you want to operate in, and then any sort of like combinations that you want to do with how you structured your character. For example, if I'm good at throwing things because I'm playing a jester that can like knife juggle, which is something you get at level 3 or can get at level 3, then I probably want to play with throwing weapons.
On a tangential note, the third page of the character sheet, every time I get to like, I don't know, like level 5 or 6 or beyond in D&D, I wish I had tracked the progression, like in the changes that I made. Like I wish I had a change log for my character, because then you like, maybe you try to rebuild one element, or you're just like not 100% sure you actually updated everything and you're questioning if you have the right number of hit points or whatever. And so the progression tracker, like the change log for your character, is I think that's a really helpful tool that I wish I remembered for all my D&D characters, but I always forget.
Yeah, just to point it out here on the video. So it's really simple. If you look at page 3 of the character creation, there is a progression tracker, which is just a bunch of boxes for your levels, and how you're intended to use it is like when you get, a +1 to something, or like a new ability or a new spell or whatever, write it in. It is very easy to get tripped up on the development of the progression of a character for the reasons that Steph mentioned. And also there's a downtime component where you learn some skills, or like you learn a skill and a knowledge kind of between a level. And actually that it doesn't really count for it here, but you can very easily write it in and then put a line above it or whatever, so that you can help parse exactly where you're learning everything. Real quick, what's everybody equipped with? Just weapons and armor.
2 daggers and a gambeson.
Okay.
A shepherd's crook, vestments, and a med kit.
Okay, cool.
A longsword, brigandine, and a med.
Cool. So if we go down to page 56, there's a bunch of like little stuff that we just want to make sure that we take care of. So recording your health. Everybody has a health die associated with their lineage, and then each class has a health bonus associated with it. How this works is at level 1, your health die maximum value, you get that by default. D&D does this too. And then you add your class health bonus on top of it. So if you're playing a ferryman, what's your max health right now?
10, right?
Yes, maybe. Do you get a +1 or a +2 from your class?
+2.
Okay, yeah, so this is 10.
Yeah, so my health die is a 1d8, and my health bonus is a +2. So that's 10.
Cool.
Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah.
And the Ulstadr Elementalist, what is your health?
My max would be 14.
It's a lot. And then the Elven Cutpurse, what's your health?
For first level, it's 10.
Cool. All right. Easy peasy. So in the last update, we changed how willpower works. So just for everybody here who's currently on the panel, this is actually going to be fresh here too. But everybody gets a pool of willpower die. Your willpower die, outside of combat, you have no willpower. None. When you get into combat, everybody gets 1 willpower by default. Certain classes will get more, like the strategist can end up with 2 instead of 1, and then other classes have the ability to increase and decrease willpower with a little bit more flexibility than some of the other classes. Your willpower maximum, so the maximum amount of willpower that you can hold at any time is equal to how many players are in your party, or how many characters rather. So for you, it's going to be 3. That's your maximum. And then we'll move on to our death marks. So death marks in this game. Again, grounded, not gritty experience. However, the more you enter the dying state, you get death marks ticked against you. And you can only have so many death marks before you're dead forever. You lose that character. It's donezo. Over time, you will gain a higher death mark maximum, but the death marks that you have, they do not go away. So play smart. Don't cause problems that you can't end in a way that is favorable to you. And heal before you go down. If you play D&D, you know you might have some opinions on this personally. Mine is that it's too easy to pick people back up from unconscious in D&D. Drives me absolutely nuts. So one of the solutions that we have in Distal is to kind of shape the concept of dying through these death marks so that over time, your character, as they teeter on the precipice of never coming back, is probably going to shape how that character interacts with the world.
Can you elect to start with death marks if you think it makes sense for your backstory?
So that has a major implication to ferrymen in particular. There's some specialties that you get that are contingent on you having death marks, which...
like spell slots. The number of spell slots I have is determined by my death marks. So if I wanted to play risky and just be like, I've died 6 times, then I could have way more spell slots.
So that being
I
said,
should. Yeah.
it's a very gameable mechanic in that way, because you can enter your first combat and just dancing in front of people, and yeah, you're gonna die. And then as long as you could trust your party to pick you back up, maybe it's all good. So I don't actually know the answer to that question. I think that if it makes sense for your backstory and if your GM allows it, what do you want out of this?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of it as a gameable mechanic. I do know Ferryman. I haven't really looked over in depth what the class does. I just know that it is a gameable mechanic in particular. But I mean, I was just looking at what my backstory looked like, and I don't know. I could see how I know that the system is designed to be grounded, not gritty, and I could also see how a particular table could make it more gritty by just starting with a certain number of death marks to get kind of that higher risk, higher reward gameplay.
Let's mind our weight limits. So if you look down just the paragraph below, the only thing that you'll need to adjust is if you have a negative strength or a positive strength. And that's it. Pretty straightforward. If you do have a negative score to your strength, which is going to be all Tangle folk at the start, unless you compensate for that deficiency, it's going to be even less. Moving on to, okay, so this is the part where we reach level 1 with our class. If you have not yet filled in your, actually, let's just move up to, so at level 1, the Elementalist is going to be a Laysmith, which means that they become proficient in Arcana and Ingenuity. If you've already received these proficiencies from your background, you can choose untrained knowledge proficiencies instead. So instead of Arcana, I could be like Streetwise or body language, that sort of thing. And then also, you'll get Imbue Weapon at level 1, which is a technique, which is like a bonus action in this game. You can light your weapon on fire or make it cold or make it lightning or whatever. So for the Ferryman, you get all this fun stuff at level 1. It tells you which spellcasting sources you're proficient in, which on the character sheet, you'll want to just note those in the combat proficiencies alongside your weapons and that sort of thing. So you become proficient in Anima and Planar spellcasting. Those are 2 separate spellcasting types, and they're both going to be +1 for you. You learn a number of spells, which we'll get to in the final checks in the next part, equal to stuff and things. And then the spell slots are off the at level 1. They're 2 plus half your class level. So, well, half your class level, which at level 1, we always round down in Distal. Do not round up ever. Don't round up sometimes. Just round down always. So for 1, unless it says minimum 1 next to it or has some minimum value, it's a 0. Half of 1 is 0, as we all know. So your spellcasting sources are listed here. Again, the casting cost, it tells you how spells work. We're not going to cover that currently. But the Ferryman is going to grab a number of level 0 or level 1 spells equivalent to however many it said that they would be getting. Pretty much it. There's one more little point here in final checks that just covers like combat proficiencies. So just to make sure that you all have your combat proficiencies, they should all be 1, right? +1? Awesome. Okay. Now you're ready to play the game. Kind of. Let us move on to the last thing that we're going to be doing. This is it. What you all will be doing in this short 3-story campaign will depend on what sort of organization that you build together. You build an organization during the session 0, and it acts as a sort of team building exercise that already stitches your characters together. This is how they know each other. So via prompts, we're going to start with your organization specializes in prompt and prefers to be paid in prompt. So how do you want to do it?
Okay, so what are the options? So we could all roll and then just take our choice, like as a group, or we could have the DM roll. This is more for like other groups, like some of the different ways that you could do it. You could just have a conversation about it, right? Do you have any other methodologies that you would suggest? You can take turns rolling.
Yeah. If worst came to worst, you can have everybody pick something, and then just that's where you end up. But this is a really good opportunity to kind of feel out who's going to be the problem child at the table. Hopefully none, but you can help kind of smooth those rough edges just by talking. So if we were going to talk, let's say what sorts of, I know it's less fun than rolling. Let's say what sorts of themes would you be interested in playing? Or here's a question. What themes have you rarely had an opportunity to play?
All right, so story-wise, for my character, I feel like I could easily integrate recovering lost items, reinforcing armies, archaeological exploits, assassination, beginning revolutions, or training militias, or wilderness explanation. Like, I could easily connect any of those to the backstory that I have in mind, and they would make sense. The other ones would be stretching stuff.
Okay, the one I haven't really done off of these would be smuggling goods and assassination. And mostly it's because I'm not really into assassination. So I did not find the Dark Brotherhood questline of Skyrim enjoyable, for instance, which is a hot take, but it is my take.
I think I haven't really done assassination. I don't think I'm not very interested in training militias, unless I just don't know what all that would entail. But I'm pretty open to doing any of them, really.
John,
Cool.
which one? You said which ones you hadn't done. Which ones are compelling based on your backstory?
Any of the other ones? Like the training militias one is actually kind of fun because it's like that Mandalorian episode where there's an invading army and the action isn't in training the militia as much as seeing how well the militia picks it up and then us being able to help in like a big battle at the end. That's how I at least interpret it.
So, for some clarity, that is maybe what your organization might specialize in, but that doesn't mean that that's all that they're doing. It's probably the best work that you're doing. It's probably what you're known for doing, even if it only happened once. But from a meta perspective, this sort of thing allows us to kind of sort through, at the very least, the things that we don't want to do. You know, like I have no interest in assassination because I just don't want to do the pre-planning and it just doesn't sound great. Monster slaying, super easy, to pick up, for people who are maybe just getting into the game for the first time. That might be something that they're interested in, or have a specific fantasy that they're trying to live out through, their characters. Based on what you all have said, though, it kind of seems like a rolling might be worth doing because there's a lot of options. We could just roll it and then see where you end up and then massage it after that.
What if the three of us roll and then we pick whatever we like?
Okay.
Yeah,
Go for
I
it.
agree. I got archaeological exploits.
I got security.
I also got archaeological exploits.
Okay. Well, do you want to roll it again?
Why?
Okay.
I like that.
Okay. All right.
Unless
Whatever you want to do.
Unless, John, you hate it.
I don't. Indiana Jones. Indiana
Okay.
Jones.
Yeah.
Perfect. Nailed it. Prompt 2. And prefers to be paid in...
Gold.
Money, 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 money.
Okay. Are you sure not food and livestock?
Boo.
Okay.
I don't mind rolling, but if the majority wants to go with gold, I'm fine with that.
Please roll. I will be interested to see what you come up with. It's food and livestock.
Look, I got it too.
I literally rolled a 2.
I got personal favors, but gold is fine too.
That one's
Okay.
uncomfortable. I actually got useful items. But
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So we are doing archaeological exploits, and you prefer to be paid in gold. And you're known for, or rather, you are known. Somebody roll it. This one
I
matters
got
less.
in secret circle.
Okay. That's fun.
Wait, I rolled the wrong die though, so do that right. Kitty, what'd you get?
I got far and wide.
Okay.
I also got in secret circles.
Oh, and I rolled the right die. I got locally.
What do you want it to be?
Maybe they're local secret circles.
I like secret circles. That one's fun.
Okay. And the so you're known in secret circles for...
Making a mess.
Okay.
For
That should be...
sending a message and having a strict code of conduct.
I got defying the odds and getting results.
Making a mess while having a strict code of conduct.
Okay. All right. This already seems messy, kind of as it is here. So what do you want to settle on?
Okay, if you want it to be a team building exercise, exercises can be messy.
No.
Because the whole point is to get the whole team talking. So
No, that's what I'm
so just because it's messy doesn't mean it's a bad process.
for sure.
I like defying the odds, because if we're known in secret circles and we're doing this for gold, it gives us a little more prestige.
That gives you a really good reason to do the thing that they can't trust anybody else with.
I also like the strict code of conduct. You know what you're paying for.
All right. So we are so your organization specializes in archaeological exploits and prefers to be paid in gold. That boring. You are known in secret circles for defying the odds and a strict code of conduct. So most call you. It's the name generating time.
I got pick a color. Skull.
I got the Valiant Noose.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't do the second half. Let's see. So I got Shifty Eye.
Shifty-eyed spies.
Let's mix up. Let's do so one. Let's pick whoever has the first or a first prompt. Which is the favorite? What was it? Silken something? Wait, Kitty had
So I had
pick a color.
Shifty, Kitty had gold. And John, what'd you have?
Valiant.
So Valiant, Shifty, or Gold. I feel like it's determined by the second one though. Like
Maybe.
Shifty Eye is pretty good, But like that doesn't mean I'm not open to something else. But I don't know that I'd want to be like, I don't know, Golden Eye feels a little.
Well, I had just had pick a color, so it can be any color we want. The second one I had was skull.
Oh,
Red
skulls.
Skull. John, what's your thought?
Of all of them, I like Skulls as like the ending one the best. I like it more than Noose.
What about the shifty skulls? The
Weird.
red skulls.
That's
The
a
gold
super villain.
skulls.
Gold skull. Unless the DM wants to roll the last one.
Oh, I like that.
Or no.
I like that. I want to participate.
Yeah, see if you get something better. Like I feel like of the options we had, like I'm cool with Gold Skulls, but I want to see if there's another option. See if
Okay.
you get something better.
Let's see. So we're gonna keep skulls maybe, and then an 8. Grim. The grim skulls. It's kind of.
What'd you get if you
like that.
re-roll the skulls?
Wait, guard. The grim guard.
The Grim Guard. That's kind of cool.
It's very. Metal.
Yeah, I'm into it.
I
Okay.
can
Every
dig it.
organization I've ever made is a guard.
Okay, cool. So the Grim Guard does something that is about nothing that has to do with guarding people, but totally makes
We
sense.
guard them from the Grim by retrieving dangerous artifacts
Actually,
that need to be quarantined in a museum.
Oh, okay.
GG.
Maybe it's
GG.
ironic because we're breaking into tombs that should be guarded and removing the thing.
Interesting. All right. Well, that is gonna determine what we'll be playing. I'll lean pretty hard into all of that, and then we will be back for the first play session. Keep it short and sweet. 3 episodes. I'm gonna kill all your characters, and that is where we'll end it. Thank you very much for hanging out.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.